Chapter 1. Fingerprint Flowers. Uncle Lan said to me, "Let me see your hands." I curled my fingers tightly and hid them behind my back. "But my hands are clean. I washed them this morning." Uncle An laughed. "I'm not checking if your hands are dirty. I just want to see how many fingerprint flowers you have." Behind my back, my hands loosened a bit. I stretched out my left hand and asked, "What are fingerprint flowers, Uncle?" Uncle N looked surprised. "You're this big and you don't know what fingerprint flowers are." He took my hand gently and explained. "Fingerprint flowers are the round swirls at the tips of your fingers. The more you have, the better you'll be at drawing. If you have 10, you'll be the best artist in your class. And your handwriting will be the best too." I watched anxiously as Uncle N examined each of my fingers, like he was studying the veins on leaves. I held my breath and asked, "How many do I have, Uncle?" Uncle N shook his head, disappointed. "None at all." I echoed sadly, "None at all." For a second, everything went dark. My heart sank and dropped somewhere deep inside me, maybe all the way down to my toes. "Don't worry," Uncle An said warmly, trying to comfort me. "You don't draw with your left hand, right? Your right hand is the important one. Come on, give it here." It felt like I had just been pulled out of a cold stream. I quickly held out my right hand. Uncle N lifted it close to his eyes and examined it very carefully, as if even a slight movement would mess up the swirls. He was so focused, it looked like he was peering through a magnifying glass at tiny insects. "Aha, there's one," he shouted excitedly. "A fingerprint flower?" I asked, holding back a cheer in case I misheard. "Yep, a fingerprint flower." His face lit up like someone had just lit a candle in his eyes. "On your thumb?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What about the other fingers?" Uncle unclicked his tongue. "Let's see." He bent down again, gently touching each finger with his hands and eyes, mumbling as he went. "Index finger, nope, nothing here. Middle finger, nothing either. Oh, found another one." I asked again, like someone half asleep. "Another fingerprint flower, you bet." He smiled, though his voice pretended to scold. "I'm on a mission to find your fingerprint flowers, remember?" But that was the last one he found. My pinky had none. So I had 2 fingerprint flowers in total, one on my thumb and one on my ring finger. Uncle N told me to look closely at the tips of my fingers as he explained. Just like he said, the swirl on my ring finger was perfectly round, with tiny circles stacked inside each other like the ripples I'd see when I tossed a stone into a pond. The one on my thumb wasn't as neat. Its lines twisted like a whirlpool, but Uncle An still called it a flower. Just not as pretty as the other one. He looked out into the sunny yard and squinted. "Look outside. There are many kinds of flowers, but not all of them are equally beautiful, right?" From that day on, I grabbed everyone's hand I met, looking for fingerprint flowers. My little brother Tichiang had 6, and I was shocked. "Wow, you've got so many. When you grow up, you'll be great at drawing and writing." "What's a fingerprint flower?" Big brother Tichiang asked. So I explained it to him. He looked at me with wide eyes. "So how many do you have?" I sighed. "Just 2. I said it with the same sadness, as if I'd only had 2 teeth, or 2 toes. Teaching tiptoed to rest his arm on my shoulder. "But even so, I still won't be able to draw better than you. You're always the best at drawing." Hearing that made me feel a little better. At school, I grabbed my classmates' hands to inspect, and it made me so sad to see that everyone had more fingerprint flowers than I did. Especially MDN, every single one of her fingers had a flower. The swirls were perfect. Looking at her flowery fingers, I said, "Jealous. You've got so many. If your hands had 6 fingers like old Mr. NCMV, you'd probably have 12 flowers." MDN shrank back. "Ooh, that's scary. I don't need 12. Chapter 2. The Fingers. Since that day, I developed a habit of gazing at my hands. Before, I had never paid them any attention. I bossed them around to do this and that, copying lessons, sharpening pencils, scratching my back, getting into fistfights with my friends, pulling man's hair, moving chairs from one place to another, and most of the time, I simply forgot about them. Now, sitting alone in the sunshine on the sidewalk, I finally had time to look at my hands. Have you ever looked at your hands? If you ever take the time to observe them, you'll see how obedient they are. You don't even have to say anything out loud. You just give a command in your head, like lift up, and your hands will immediately obey. Both hands will rise, if you want both the left and the right to listen. If you want them to clench, they'll clench. If you say, stay still, only the thumbs should move, the thumbs will wiggle, while the other fingers remain perfectly still. Your hands never rebel against you, which is why adults often order them to do all sorts of things, from good deeds like hammer this nail in, or wash that shirt, to harmful actions, like pulling a trigger or setting off a bomb. If you're a kid like me, you've probably done things like order your fingers to pick your nose, or pinch your deskmate's ear. The kind of stuff my parents and teachers strictly forbid. In general, our hands are very well behaved. They usually lie quietly, waiting for our commands. And yet, we often don't show them any affection. Sometimes we force them into dangerous situations that leave them scraped up or bleeding. I love my hands most when I sit and gaze at them, usually right after my mom trims my nails. At those times, my fingers look like freshly bathed children, clean and neat. When I closely examine the two whorls on my right thumb and ring finger, I feel such fondness for them, even a hint of pride. It's like having 10 children, but only 2 of them are good students, and you get to boast to your neighbor. My 2 boys just passed their university exams. Sometimes you even add, they didn't even study that hard, but still passed with ease. Just to hear your neighbor gasp in admiration, wow, such smart kids. The other fingers, I love them too, even more so in fact, in the way parents love their less fortunate children. I often think that when I grow up, get married, and have 10 children, I'll try to love all 10 equally, even though it's likely that the less intelligent ones will still be less intelligent, and the less beautiful ones will remain less beautiful. Our hands are like close friends, always sharing in our joys and sorrows. Think about it, when you're excited or thrilled, your hands eagerly clap together to double the happiness in your heart. When you cry, your hands take turns gently wiping away the tears rolling down your cheeks. At those moments, they're like the magical birds from fairy tales, carefully collecting each sparkling teardrop and sending them into the sun, the wind, or the rain, so that a little while later, a fresh glow returns to your once pale face. Ever since I realized that, I developed a habit of sticking my hands out the window by my study desk. I bathe them in the rain, just to see the fingertips wrinkle, like the riddle we kids often ask each other. A tree with 5 branches, dips it in water, and it wilts. Leave it alone, and it stays fresh. Then I dry them in the sunshine, just like my mom dries clothes on the fence, letting the sunlight warm and dry my fingers while the wind tickles them gently. One time, when Man came over to my house and saw me sticking my hands out the window, she stared and asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm drying my fingers." "Have you ever dried your fingers before?" "No." "So what do you do when your hands are wet?" "I wipe them on my pants." I cried out, "Yuck, who wipes their hands on their pants?" A few days later, when I went to Man's house to buy a bottle of soy sauce, her family runs a little store. I saw her sitting inside, holding her hands out the window exactly like I had. I asked joyfully, "Are you drying your hands?" And she answered happily, "Yeah, I just finished washing the dishes." But not every time did Man answer me, in such a cheerful voice. "Drying your hands again?" I asked on another occasion, seeing her resting her chin in both hands, elbows on the windowsill, staring blankly outside. "No, I'm not drying my hands," she replied, her voice low. "I'm drying my face." "Why? Did you just take a bath?" "No, my mom just gave me a beating. I didn't ask anything else." Because I understood. Man was drying her tears. Poor girl. Uncle Ann is 8 years older than me. He is my father's youngest brother. He lives with my grandmother, since he is the only child who hasn't married yet. My grandmother's house isn't far from mine, so I often run over to visit her. And Uncle Ann often comes to play with my brother and me. Uncle N has only one arm. His right arm is amputated up to the elbow. When he walks on the street, one sleeve flutters in the wind, like the arm of a scarecrow guarding a melon patch. But with his remaining arm, he plays the harmonica better than anyone in the village. My father said that Uncle N used to work at a sugarcane press. No one knows exactly what happened, maybe he dozed off, but his arm got caught in the sugarcane grinder, and was crushed. The doctor had to amputate it to save him. The other day, when he was reading my palm, I forgot to ask him how many whorls fingerprints he had. That question bothered me the whole day. That evening, I was about to run to my grandmother's house to find him, when I heard him clearing his throat loudly at our gate. That was his way of announcing his arrival, kind of like saying Theo TNG, Uncle An is here to play. I rushed out to the gate right after the first throat clearing. Uncle An, how many whirls do you have? I shouted as I ran. Me. He rubbed my head with his only hand. I used to have 5 whirls, but now I don't have any. Why, Uncle? I asked, confused. Did the whirls disappear too? No, they didn't disappear, he chuckled, letting go of my head and touching his stump. It's just that all 5 whirls were on my right hand. His right hand, the one that had been amputated. Suddenly I said, but even if your right hand is gone, you still had 5 whirls, right? Uncle An looked surprised by my logic. He stared at me with wide eyes, like he was seeing me for the first time. He kept staring for a long moment, and said nothing, which made me feel unsure. Was I wrong, Uncle? I asked anxiously. No. What you said was wonderful. Something that simple, and I never thought of it. Haha, that's great. That means I still have 5 whirls. Everyone. I can confirm to you all. Uncle An still has 5 whirls. Even though no one can see them anymore. Because he draws beautifully. To my brother Tichiang, I'm the best at drawing. But to me, Uncle An is number 1. Whenever I didn't feel like doing my drawing homework, I'd ask him to do it for me. And every time, his drawings got the highest marks in class. Back then, our house was next to the National Highway, and behind it lay a vast cemetery. It was so large, that even in our garden, there were 2 old, abandoned graves, that had been there long before our family moved in. At night, when we sat inside and looked out at the flickering incense that my mother lit every evening in front of the graves, all of us kids felt a chill. And to make it worse, every time Uncle N came over, he'd gather my brother and me to tell us ghost stories. Uncle N played the harmonica beautifully, but he never seemed interested in performing for us kids. Only after much pleading would he pull the harmonica from his pocket, blow a few short tunes, then quickly tuck it back and say, "I'm out of breath." He looked like someone who'd just bitten into a rotten corn cob. Even though he claimed to be out of breath, I immediately say, "Let me tell you a ghost story." And at that moment, he didn't seem short of breath at all. He'd tell story after story without pause. Each one was chilling, and I never knew how he came up with so many of them. We listened with wide eyes, a mix of fear and fascination, glancing nervously toward the door every now and then. Our hearts pounded whenever we saw those glowing incense flames near the 2 graves in the garden. Chai yang ke chayan si thon sai hai si I tran ring, ba ma gi wu jia, by rchim suit hyen gay, hong ki geek na, jt wook sai teen tm thi can goi vn ret. Va han na bang si my ngam tlm bam dc ni ctt ang tu vvi tri, tre hai han mei chi si kung chu kang ko. Tic gin han si chat sai san lei mei chi bun ri gm si trong na ko. Chin thanks sao si gramt bgc vheomgigmg bit loss si ba ma lam. Then there was the story of little Guk, who was walking home from his farm at noon, and met his father, Mr. Nchmve, on the road. He greeted him, "Where are you going, Dad?" But when he got home, he found his father playing Chinese chess with their neighbor, Mr. B, and was told his father had been there all morning. Gok got so sick he nearly died. His father scolded him. "How could you be so foolish? Noon is ghost hour. If you see someone familiar or hear someone calling your name, never respond. You met a ghost and spoke to it. You're lucky it didn't steal your soul." But among all Uncle Nsei's tales, my favorite was the story of the haunted house of Mr. Bahun. It was the only 2-story house in the village, with a wooden attic where his son Essen slept. Essen usually slept in a tank top and would hang his shirt on a hook before lying down. One morning, when he reached for his white shirt, he was shocked to see it had turned pink overnight. He touched it, it felt slimy. He brought it to the front door to inspect it in the light, and saw the shirt was soaked in blood. He screamed, threw the shirt down, and ran away in terror. Mr. Bahun invited a shaman to the house. After searching for 3 days, the shaman declared there was a ghost with a heavy grudge in the house. Mr. Bahun asked, "Why was my son's shirt bloody?" The shaman replied, "At midnight, the ghost put it on to play." Then he asked, "Has your food been spoiling more often lately?" Mrs. Bahun gasped, "How did you know?" The shaman shrugged, "Of course, I know. Spoiled food means a ghost has touched it." The next day, Mr. Bahun took an umbrella and caught a bus to the city, to find the previous owner. When he came home, His wife asked, "What happened?" He looked glum. He confirmed it. His daughter married a gambler. After the husband went to prison, she was so heartbroken that she hanged herself in the attic. He told this to the shaman, who climbed up to the attic again. He searched around and found a rectangular ridge in the wall. "This used to be a window," he said. "Someone sealed it up." He explained, "There's a Buddha altar in the attic. The ghost didn't dare stay there, so it ran downstairs. When they sealed the wall, it got trapped." Mr. Bahun turned pale. "So what should we do?" The shaman said, "Break the wall, let it out, then seal it back again." I asked Uncle N, "How do we know the ghost will come out? We can't see it." He squinted at me and said, "Ordinary people can't see ghosts, but shamans can." Tichien confidently declared, "The ghost won't come out." "Why?" I asked. "It's afraid of the Buddhas upstairs." Uncle N snapped, "You silly boy. The ghost doesn't live upstairs. It only goes up to pay respect to the Buddha, before moving on to its next life." But Tichiang wouldn't stop. He always asked the same old question. Why didn't the ghost sneak out the front door, Uncle, just to hear Uncle N give the same old answer? Ghosts never use the front door. They only go out the back or the side. That was all there was to the ghost story of Mr. Bahun's house, but my brother and I loved it. Every time we heard it, I'd imagine the ghost putting on Sen's shirt, then taking it off soaked in blood, and my stomach would twist in fear. I also liked to picture the ghost trapped in the house, probably like a scared child, crying silently, but no one in the house could hear. We loved the story so much that whenever Uncle Ann started talking about Miss Thone, or Little Jock, we'd beg, "Tell us about Mr. Bahun's house, Uncle." Tell the story where Essen threw the shirt and ran away. So Uncle Ann would give in. He'd roll up his sleeves, especially over his stump of an arm, as if getting ready, then smile, and clear his throat. Mr. Bahun's house was the only two-story house in the village, haunted by a ghost from the previous owner's time. That was all we needed. My brother and I would scoot closer, mouths hanging open, hair standing on end, both thrilled and terrified. To scare us even more, Uncle Ann always ended the story the same way, glancing nervously toward the door, and suddenly gasping, "Ghost, there it is." And like clockwork, we'd scream, leap out of our seats like spring-loaded toys, and scatter in terror. Hearing the ruckus, my father would come rushing from the main house. He'd block my escape, grab me by the collar and shout, "What's going on?" Pale as a sheet, I'd point at Uncle An, who was laughing hysterically, and stammer, "Uncle An," and scared us with a ghost. My father would grab the dog-beating stick by the wall, and yell, "Damn it, you're too old for this nonsense." Uncle An would dash into the night like lightning, my father chasing him with the stick. I don't know if my dad ever managed to land a hit, but I could hear their footsteps pounding around the yard. Eventually, Uncle An would slip out the gate, run up to the highway, and flee to his grandmother's house. Only then would my father return, fuming and out of breath. That was how every one of Uncle N's ghost stories ended during my childhood, with him being chased by my father. These chases only stopped when Uncle N quietly left the village to go find Aunt Vin. Chapter 5. My Father's Stick. The stick stood by the wall. At night, my father often took it with him, when going out to guard against aggressive dogs. I don't know if he ever managed to strike a dog that lunged at his legs. Just as I don't know if he ever managed to land a hit on Uncle N. But that stick certainly landed on my back end, but many times. My father was a talkative man. He often took me out, and wherever we went, people were always captivated by his storytelling. He spoke with energy and charisma. Whenever he told stories about Tithin Sanerchung Viendium, dozens of people would gather around, listening with entranced faces, as if under a spell. He also had a talent for composing poetry. In our village, there was a man named Uncle T. Kang, a widower who lived with his daughter Bina. He raised 2 buffaloes, each with a bell around its neck. When they wandered off, he would follow the sound of the jingling bells to find them. At first, wherever his buffaloes went, the village kids would gather, mistaking the bell sounds for an ice cream cart. Since then, people started calling him the Ice Cream Man. He and his daughter earned a living harvesting rice for hire. One day, while they were working in a rice field, they disturbed a nest of wasps hidden in the stalks. Bina got stung on the butt, and screamed loudly. Uncle T. Kang, panicked, rushed over yelling, "What's wrong, my child, what's wrong?" A swarm of wasps flew out and stung him right in the groin. He dropped his sickle, and ran for his life. After getting far enough, he pulled down his pants to check and cried out in agony. My father composed a teasing poem, and the next day the village children sang it everywhere. First the wasps stung Bina. Then they turned on the ice cream pia. He checked down there and gasped in shock. 2 lumps before, now he's got a third to mock. It was just a joke, but Uncle T. Kang carried a machete around looking for my father for a whole week. Then there was the story of Mr. Si-hun winning the lottery. He had only ever bought 1 lottery ticket in his life. Thinking he'd never win, he used cold rice to stick the ticket on the central pillar of his house for decoration. Against all odds, that ticket turned out to be the jackpot winner. Overjoyed but stuck, Mr. Si-hun couldn't remove the ticket from the post without tearing it. Afraid of damaging it, he sawed the entire pillar off and carried it onto the road to catch a ride to the city to claim the prize. He did get the money eventually, but along the way, the pillar he carried knocked over at least a dozen people. No one died, but the compensation costs for medicine and hospital stays ate up nearly all his winnings. Without the main pillar, the house roof sagged, and after a heavy rain, it collapsed completely. Though the whole family escaped unharmed, the next day Mr. Si-hun had to borrow money everywhere to rebuild. His mouth drooped to one side like someone struck by a stroke. My father, inspired by the event, composed "Winning the Lottery," felt like a bomb from hugging the post to hugging the debt. The kids sang the verse one day, and the next, Mr. Si-hun showed up at our house. He came empty-handed, face crumpled in misery. "You were right, Brother Sao. My house is wrecked like a bomb hit it. Please lend me a little money." My father was lively and cheerful in public, but at home, he was quick-tempered. My siblings and I got whipped by him quite often. He had a rattan switch that he somehow acquired and hung on the wall. Whenever we misbehaved, he'd clench his lips, pull it down with a swish, and lash it with a snap. Getting whipped with that switch hurt so badly I wet my pants, red welts crisscrossing my body. Terrified, my mother secretly took the switch down and hid it. When my father got angry and couldn't find the switch, he grabbed the dog-beating stick and smacked it across my back instead. So my mother quietly put the switch back where it was. From that day on, my siblings and I got beaten with both the switch and the stick. Any child can have hundreds of reasons, hundreds of faults to be punished. One of my biggest faults was being afraid of ghosts. I was so scared of ghosts that I didn't dare walk past the cemetery at night. Even though in the daytime, the cemetery was a magical playground for us kids. I followed my friends herding cows, running and jumping over the mounds of earth, playing tag and hide-and-seek. Our favorite game was always kite flying. The feeling of pulling a paper kite against the wind, watching it soar into the sky. While my hand kept releasing the fishing line, it felt like I was lifting up the entire sky. I would let out all the string, tie the end to the base of a willow tree, then rest my head on a rotten log, face up to the blue sky, watching the kites glide and dance above. But when the shadows of night fell, the world around me took on a different face. At night, the cemetery flickered with fireflies mixed with ghost lights, and every time I had to pass by, the hair on my neck stood on end. Uncle Dan's ghost stories would come flooding into my head, making me want to faint. Man's family ran a small grocery shop, quite far from my house, but my mother often sent me over there sometimes for a duck egg, other times for a bottle of fish sauce, and always at night. For me, it was a nightmare. That year I was in 7th grade, already 13 years old, but still scared of ghosts. I nervously walked past the cemetery under the dim starlight, always feeling like someone was behind me. When I turned to look, there was no one. But the moment I looked forward again, I could hear footsteps right behind me. Terrified, I would take off running, and the steps behind would chase me, pounding louder and louder, making me want to wet my pants. It happened every time. As soon as I burst into the shop, man would ask in surprise, "Why do you look so panicked?" Pooh. I didn't dare admit I was scared of ghosts. I said I was chased by a dog. From her expression, I knew she didn't believe me, but she said nothing. My house and hers were separated by the cemetery. And there were no other houses in between, so no other dog could possibly be there, except her old dog Ven. Ven was an old dog. Its eyes were nearly blind, it could hardly see anything. Its ears and nose weren't sharp anymore either, but of course it still knew when I came. It just lay quietly under the bed, its back to me, wagging its tail lazily in greeting. Ven was just like its owner. Man's father was almost blind, 2. My father said he was suffering from blurred vision. Back when his eyes were still good, he worked as a barber. He was one of 2 barbers in our village. But he was more professional. He cut hair at home, with a cardboard sign scribbled with, "Haircut." The other guy was a traveling barber. For a long time, I used to get my hair cut at man's father's place. But then my dad wouldn't let me go there anymore. One time, he nearly cut off someone's ear. Another time he made someone bleed at the chin. Then one day, people in the village noticed red patches on his skin, and a few weeks later, white scaly flakes appeared on those red patches. He scratched while cutting hair, and flakes flew off like chalk dust. People started whispering that he had leprosy. Some even said it was leprosy that ruined his eyes. No one knew for sure, but gradually customers stopped coming. Soon, the barber shop shut down. Man's mother opened a small grocery shop to make ends meet. Every evening, as soon as I got the duck egg or bottle of fish sauce from Man, I would dash back home, eyes almost shut tight so I wouldn't accidentally glance toward the cemetery. Many times I tripped and fell along the way. Whatever I was holding would break if I didn't end up covered in yolk. I'd be reeking of fish sauce by the time I got home. If my father saw me like that, he would beat me with a stick. My mother would plead, "Please, he's just scared of ghosts." But that only made my father angrier. He would strike harder and growl, "Ghosts, my foot. Grown up like this, and still scared of ghosts." And so my back was covered in welts. And so that night, my mother cried while rubbing salt on my wounds. Chapter 7. 2. Actually, I didn't get spanked as often in my childhood as my younger brother Tuong did. Tuong was a very handsome kid, beautiful from a young age. He inherited my mother's delicate features, and my father's large eyes with long eyelashes. His hair was thick and silky, his skin fair and rosy, and he had a wide smile with a set of white, evenly spaced teeth, like polished pebbles. Whenever Tuong smiled, it felt like his whole face lit up. That smile, that angelic face, always brought a strange, inexplicable joy to whoever looked at him. Yet between the 2 of us, he was the one who got spanked the most by our father, not because he was mischievous, but because he had a mischievous older brother. One time, I convinced him to skip our afternoon nap to sneak over to the empty lot next to our house to play rock thrilling. The village had planned to build a clinic there, and piles of crushed rocks had been left behind when they ran out of money. The rocks were as big as fists, hard as steel, with sharp edges. If you got hit, it could split your head open. Tuong was terrified. He hesitated, staring at the rocks, and pulled his head in like a turtle. "I don't want to play this. What if it hits someone in the head? We could die." "Nobody's gonna die," I reassured him. "We'll stand far apart and throw at each other. If we see the rock coming, we can just dodge. From that distance, even if we get hit, it won't hurt much." Tuong didn't look convinced. He glanced at the flaming red flamboyant tree across the street. "How about we pick the stamens and play cockfighting instead, big bro?" Flamboyant stamens are long and slender, with a brown, rice-shaped tip. We kids used to play cockfighting with them. 2 stamens were hooked together at the tips, and pulled until one snapped. Whoever's broke first lost. Every summer I'd play that too, but this time, I was hooked on the rock-throwing game. I curled my lip. "That's a girl's game. We're boys. Boys play rock throwing, or javelin throwing." I gave Tuong a sly look out of the corner of my eye. "Or do you want to play knife throwing?" Just hearing the words knife throwing made Tuong shiver. Okay, let's play rock." Then he sprinted far away, all the way to the road, and turned back. "Is this spot good?" "Yeah, you stay there. Let's start." I bent down and picked up 2 rocks, one in each hand. Tuong scrambled to grab some too. I stood at the edge of the graveyard, and Tuong by the roadside. For over an hour, it felt like a hailstorm, raining down under the glaring afternoon sun. Rocks sparkled as they flew through the sunlight, whizzing through the air. Tuong had a stronger arm than me. His rocks flew faster, and more accurately. I got hit a dozen times while he hadn't been hit once. The rocks had lost speed by the time they reached me, so they didn't hurt much, but it still made me furious. Worst of all, every time he hit me, Tuong would drop his hands and say in a regretful voice, "Let's stop now, okay, big bro." That stung my pride more than the rocks. No stopping. I snapped and hurled another rock. Tuong seemed flustered by my intensity. He kept playing just to please me, but his throws became hesitant and wildly off target. Realizing he was deliberately missing, I got even more frustrated, but I didn't know how to vent it. Then I came up with a plan. Okay, I surrender, I said weakly and lowered my hands. Tu Quang lit up. He had been wanting to end the game for a long time. He ran toward me without a hint of suspicion. Are you hurt? Should I go get some ointment for you? He didn't know I was still clutching a rock in my hand. When he got close, I gritted my teeth and hurled it. Completely unprepared, Tuong didn't have time to dodge. The rock hit him squarely on the temple. Honestly, I didn't mean to hit his head. I was just acting out of anger. Tuong collapsed, clutching his head. Ow, that hurts. Panicking, I ran to him and tried to pull his hands away. Let me see. When he removed them, I turned pale. His fingers were soaked in blood. Oh no, you're bleeding. Is it bad? He asked. Just a little, I lied. I covered the wound with one hand and supported his back with the other. Come on, I'll take you home and get some medicine. Tu Hong walked beside me, sniffling. Why did you throw it at me? You said you surrendered. That was a fake surrender, I said sheepishly. When people fight, they have to use tricks to win. That's what makes a good general. Tu Hong looked at me in awe, forgetting the pain. That was clever. I didn't suspect a thing. When you grow up and go to war, I bet you'll become a great general. Definitely, I said, my heart filled with guilt. I had tricked my brother and hurt him, yet he still believed in me, even the most absurd lies. As I led Tuong along the fence, I silently thought of ways to make it up to him. I promised myself, next time Tuong got in trouble, like if Dad punished him for skipping homework, I would take the blame. I'd tell Dad I was the one who convinced Tuong to go play. Suddenly, a sharp voice rang out, cutting through my thoughts. What are you two doing out here instead of napping? I didn't even need to look up. Just the chill in that voice made me tremble. I knew hell was about to break loose. Being caught by my dad under the scorching midday sun felt like being grabbed by death himself. Without saying a word, I let go of Tuong and bolted straight to my grandma's house. I hid there until dark. Only when I was sure Dad was asleep did I dare sneak back. I crept through the back, tiptoeing to our bed, dusted off my feet, and carefully slipped under the mosquito net. Big bro, Tu Hong whispered. Yeah, it's me, I whispered back. Are Mom and Dad asleep? Yes. Is your head still hurting? Just a little. Suddenly, Tu Wong let out a yelp. Keep it down, I hissed. What's wrong? I didn't touch your head, but you touched my body. I suddenly remembered. Dad gave you a beating earlier, didn't he? Of course he did. I shuddered at the thought of Dad's cane in the corner and the bamboo whip on the wall. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt. My voice wavered. Don't be mad at me. I shouldn't have run away earlier. If Dad had beaten both of us, I could have shared it with you. You would have gotten hit less. You did the right thing, running, Tu Kwang said, grabbing my hand. You're the big brother. If you had stayed, I might have gotten hit less, but you would have been beaten worse. Tu Hong didn't blame me, and that made me feel even worse. I searched my mind for the worst words I could use to curse myself, and a few days later, when everyone was out, and I convinced Tu Hong to sneak behind the house to play cards, Dad came home unexpectedly and caught us. I forgot all my promises, and again, I dashed out the front gate, leaving Tu Hong alone to take the punishment. Sometimes I felt like I was the younger sibling, and Ti Chiang was the older brother. My mother often scolded me whenever I fought over food with Ti Chiang. You're the older brother, you have to give in to your little brother. But in reality, it was always Ti Chiang who gave in to me, from big things to small. Not because Ti Chiang was afraid of me, even though I always bullied him. He gave in simply because he was a little brother who dearly loved his older brother. He cared for me, and looked after me. Because I was a good student, always bringing home prizes every year. Ti Chiang would gently touch the pencil box and the notebooks wrapped in colored plastic I placed on the table in the center of the house. Then look up at me with sparkling eyes full of joy and admiration, exclaiming endlessly, "So cool. I wonder when I'll be as good in school as you." A studious child is always the one who benefits most at home. My mother often scolded me and told me to be nice to Ti Chiang, but whenever there was housework to do, she rarely asked me. Borrowing baskets and winnowing trays from the neighbor, fetching straw to line the chicken coop, hauling water to fill the jars, those were all jobs given to Ti Chiang, simply because. Let your older brother study. Tichiang took on all the chores, big and small, in my place. His face always cheerful, never once complaining, because he thought the same as my mother. Let my older brother study. Except for the times my father got angry and whipped me, the rest of the time I lived like a little king in the house, not having to lift a finger. Later, when my father got a job in the city and only came home on weekends, even the whippings nearly disappeared. In that situation, I became even more studious, while Tichiang fell further behind in school. He had to shoulder so much housework that he barely had time for homework, but he accepted his unlucky fate without resentment. As long as I could study hard, become a doctor or engineer someday, or if there was war, rise to the rank of general, so he could be proud. Tichiang was a poor student, but he loved reading. While I never touched a book, Tichiang always had one tucked in his pocket wherever he went. If his pants didn't have pockets, he'd tuck the book into his waistband. Anytime he had free, he'd whip out a book and dive into it. Lying on the grass for hours reading was an immense pleasure for him. He read even while dangling his legs over the edge of the well, or perched on a guava branch in the backyard. Every time I caught him like that, I'd yell, "Aren't you afraid you'll fall and break your neck, Tichiang?" Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and a bunch of other stories. Tichiang knew them all by heart. Of course, I knew those stories too, but only because my father and Uncle N told them to me. For me, poring over dense pages of text to piece together a story and commit it to memory was a burden. Tung's love for reading became a benefit for me. I didn't have to touch a single book, and still got to enjoy so many wonderful tales. At night, once the two of us were in bed, I'd often ask him to tell me stories. I'd listen, and then fall asleep without even noticing. The next night, I'd ask, "Where did you stop last night, Tichiang?" Chapter 9. The Story of the Purple Toad. Tichiang read many interesting stories, but he especially liked the story of the purple toad. Meanwhile, I thought that story was terribly boring. It told the tale of a poor but studious young scholar. By day, he went into the forest to gather firewood to sell, earning enough money to buy rice and oil for his lamp. At night, he diligently read his books, not going to sleep until the neighbor's rooster crowed for the second time. He must have been reading textbooks to prepare for exams, not storybooks like Tichiang. His house was nothing more than a small hut, and his only possessions were a machete and a stack of books. His only companion was a purple toad. On the nights he studied late, the toad would hop out and stay near his feet, snapping up the mosquitoes buzzing around. Tichiang especially loved that part. He could recite it by heart, in a joyful, sing-song voice. Then the day came, when the scholar traveled to the capital for the imperial exam, and the purple toad went with him. Along the way, the scholar used the toad's magical gem to save the life of an ungrateful friend. Upon discovering that the gem had the power to bring the dead back to life, the wicked friend stole it. Around the same time, the princess in the royal palace suddenly fell gravely ill. The king and queen summoned all the royal physicians, but none could cure her. Desperate, the king issued a royal proclamation across the capital: "Whoever can save the princess shall become her husband." The news reached the purple toad. It told its master, "This is our chance to get the gem back and expose the thief." The next day, the thief, pretending to be a famous doctor, entered the palace to cure the princess. The scholar and the toad snuck in by blending in with the crowd of officials. When they arrived, the false doctor took out the gem and placed it near the princess's nose, but she remained motionless, to the growing anxiety of the king and queen. At that moment, the young scholar stepped through the crowd and addressed the king. "Your Majesty, first please have this man arrested." He took the gem and held up the purple toad, now resting calmly in his palm, and explained to everyone that this was a life-restoring gem belonging to a divine toad. Only the toad and the scholar could use it to revive the dead. The thief didn't know that the gem would only work with the toad's consent. Then, the scholar gently placed the gem at the princess's nose. As expected, she stirred, then slowly awakened to the joyful cheers of everyone present. Naturally, the ending went like this. After the princess was saved, the king accepted the scholar as his son-in-law. He later wrote the best essay in the imperial exam and became the top scholar of the nation. And not long after that, he was unanimously appointed prime minister by the entire royal court. Chapter 10. His pet Siyu. I never understood why Tu Hong liked that silly story so much. Every time I asked him to tell a story, He always started with the purple toad. Come on, tell something else. I cut him off. Always the purple toad, again and again. Tuong would tell another story, but by the next night, when we brushed off our feet and crawled under the mosquito net, he would bring out the purple toad again. He told it so many times, I finally got annoyed and flat out told him, from now on, don't ever tell me that purple toad story again, Tuong. Only one day, by chance, when I saw a toad under our bed, I finally understood why Tuong liked that story so much. Of course, the toad I saw wasn't a purple one. Uncle Dan once told us that purple toads only lived high up in the mountains, near water or ponds with lots of plants, and their skin was reddish-purple or reddish phyllo. The toad sitting in front of me looked just like any other toad I had seen, grayish, rough skin, crouched like an athlete ready to sprint at the start line of a 100-meter race. When I squatted down to look at it more closely, it stared back at me with bulging eyes full of thought, as if wondering who I was and why it hadn't seen me before. As I was observing the toad, Tuong walked into the room. Is this your pet toad? I asked. Yes, he replied. Where did you get it from? It's been here all along. You just never noticed. Its burrow is right under our bed. Tuong answered, then tossed down 7 or 8 dead flies he had just caught using a fly swatter woven from bamboo strips, which he was still holding. Here's your food, see. The toad hopped forward, its sharp tongue flicking in and out like lightning, and in a flash, the pile of flies was gone. Its name is See. Yes, I named him. He's a boy toad, but he's also Siuang Trigay, the uncle of the Jade Emperor, Tuong said as he sat beside me, eyes fixed on Siu, who was now slowly hopping back to his burrow after finishing his fly feast. Maybe Siu was hungry, and had come out to wait for Tuong, I thought, and asked, but he's not a purple toad, is he? No. So he doesn't have a magical gem that brings people back to life to give you, no. I patted Tung's shoulder, chuckled, then stopped dreaming about marrying a princess. Tuong didn't respond to my teasing. Instead, he asked, eyes dreamy. Do princesses really exist in the world, Brother Hai? I scratched my head and hesitated. I don't really know. Maybe they did in the past. But now, I don't think so. Chapter 11. Sister Vin. Tuong really adored Siu Cow. Since the day he discovered a toad living under our bed, I noticed that Tuong brought food for Siu Cow every single day. Of course, Siu Cow could find food on his own. He ate flies, mosquitoes, and insects. But Tuong was still afraid Siu Cow wouldn't have enough to eat. He sharpened bamboo sticks and wove them into a small triangular trap, then used it during his free time to catch flies. At every meal, Tuong would pick up spilled rice, gather it, and save it for Siu Cow. Whenever Siu Cow ground his teeth noisily under the bed at night, it always rained the next morning. Rainy days were always wonderful for us. While Tuong and I ran around outside in the rain, still fully clothed, chasing each other joyfully, Siu Cow would also happily hop out from under the bed, creep toward the doorway to ambush flying termites. After we got tired of playing in the rain, Tuong and I would squeeze together under the gutter to listen to the water roaring down on our heads and shoulders, imagining we were bathing under a mighty waterfall, even though up to that point, I had never seen a waterfall, except in textbook illustrations. After soaking in the rain for a while, Tuong would always come back inside and play with Siu Cow, in the way that Siu Cow liked best, helping him catch termites with wings. At moments like that, I'd leave Tuong alone with his toad and dash across the road, eager to get to Sister Vin's house. Her house was the biggest tiled house in the village. In front of it was a vast brick courtyard with an old flamboyant tree shading the corner of the fence. That was where we kids often gathered to play hopscotch, tag, blind man's bluff, and many other fun games. Sister Vin was 6 years older than me. While I was just a 13-year-old boy, she was already a beautiful young woman, though quite skinny. Her skin was fair and rosy, her hair black, thick, and long enough to touch her back. When she smiled, her eyes narrowed until they looked like 2 little minus signs, with very long eyelids. What I liked most was when she smiled. She often smiled at me, even though the courtyard was always full of noisy kids running around. She smiled at me because she liked Uncle Dan. Tuong told me this himself. He said, "Don't you remember? Back then, Uncle Dan used to stand under the flamboyant tree in front of her house playing his harmonica every night." I remember, I said, and I recalled many times my father storming out of the house with a stick in hand, shouting, "Are you crazy, Dan? Can't you let people sleep?" And only then would Uncle Dan run off. Tuong, sounding like a love expert, said Uncle Dan was confessing his love to Sister Vin. I shrugged. What do you know? You're just a little kid. But Uncle Dan told me himself. He confessed. With his harmonica. Yeah. If Uncle Dan told him, then it must be true. I stayed quiet for a moment, then wondered, why hasn't Uncle Dan been playing his harmonica under that flamboyant tree for the past month? Turned out Tuong had wondered the same thing. He smacked his lips and said, I asked him already. What did he say? Tuong giggled. He said Sister Vin's already fallen for him, so there's no need for him to wear out his lungs, chewing grilled corn every night anymore. Chapter 12. The Bluebird. Ms. Vin was infatuated with Mr. An not only because of his trumpet playing, she was also captivated by the passionate love letters he wrote. It was Ti Chang who told me this. This guy has a big flaw. He never tells a story all at once. Everything he says is like this. One day he reveals a little, the next day a bit more. Many times, by the time I hear the latter part, I've already forgotten the beginning. Of course, the one who delivered letters to Mr. N was T&G. I didn't understand why Mr. N didn't ask me to do it. I was jealous, but then I figured it out myself. Ms. Vin's father was Mr. Nan, the homeroom teacher of my class. Mr. An probably didn't ask me because he was afraid I'd be too intimidated by the teacher and mess things up. When I heard Tung's story, I had to admit Mr. An was really clever. Mr. An wrote letters, put them in envelopes, then lifted Tung's shirt and tucked the envelope into the back of his pants, hiding it behind the shirt tail. At noon, Ti Chiang ran over to Ms. Vin's house, calling loudly, Ms. Vin, Ms. Vin, Ms. Vin. Ms. Vin came out. What's the matter? Mr. An taught Ti Chiang a dozen different phrases to say. Can you give my mom a chili pepper? Can you give my mom a lemon? Can you lend my mom a bottle of soy sauce? Depending on Tung's request, Ms. Vin gave him a lemon, a chili, or a bottle of soy sauce. With one hand, she lifted the boy's shirt, took the letter, and hurriedly hid it in her own shirt. So, you come over and Mr. Nan doesn't notice? I asked. He notices. I bit my lip, but doesn't he ask anything? Sometimes he asks, where are you going, Ti Chiang? Or one day, why are you looking for Ms. Vin? I shrank back. If I were you, I'd have peed my pants. He just sits inside the house, and asks from there. Sitting inside or anywhere, it's the same. This time, I shrank and shivered. Whenever I hear his voice, I feel like fainting. Ti Chiang chuckled. You're such a coward. Offended, I got angry. You're so dumb. Your homeroom teacher is Miss Trang. If you had Mr. Nan like me, let's see if you'd still be such a coward. Chapter 13. The Bluebird in Trouble. Uncle N considered delivering letters from the boy to the girl as playing the bluebird. He praised Ti Chiang, saying, You're the best bluebird in the world, which made the kid overjoyed. But even the best bluebird in the world has its bad days. It took Ti Chiang a whole week to shyly tell me what had happened. Like I said before, this kid never tells a story all at once. That day, as usual, Ti Chiang tucked Uncle N's letter into the waistband of his pants and zoomed off to Teacher Nan's house. Shi Vingyi, Shi Vingyi. Ti Chiang stood in the yard and called loudly. But this time, he didn't see Vin anywhere. The one who came out of the house was Teacher Nan. Seeing the stern expression on the teacher's face, that was when Ti Chiang learned what fear really was. He was caught completely off guard, feeling as if his insides had vanished. He suddenly remembered the two-headed dragon guarding the golden apple tree in a story he had just read, and stared fixedly at the teacher's collar, nervously expecting a second head to sprout from there. What are you looking for Vin for, boy? Teacher Nan came closer and asked, in a cold, flat voice. Ti Chiang glanced sheepishly down at his shirt hem, then looked up and replied, I wanted to ask for a lemon for my mom. Ti Chiang told me that his eyes gave him away. The teacher's hand followed Tung's gaze, reached under his shirt, and pulled the letter from the waistband of his pants. Without a word, he turned and went back into the house. Ti Chiang stood frozen in the sunny yard, pale as a leaf, stiff with fear, wanting nothing more than to collapse to the ground. When he finally managed to move, he suddenly burst into tears. He ran home, sobbing all the way, until he reached the banana trees behind the house where Uncle An was already waiting to embrace him. Don't cry, son, what happened? Hearing that question only made Tiqian cry harder. It was like a knife twisting into his little heart, if such a thing could be called a heartbreak. He cried uncontrollably, tears streaming like a broken faucet. Uncle N lifted his shirt but found no letter. After a moment of thought, he gently asked, "You didn't sieve in?" "No, ... Tiqiang sobbed. Uncle N sighed. "Don't cry anymore." But Tiqiang kept crying. Maybe he wanted to stop but just couldn't. People cry like the sky rains only. When there's no more water, does it stop? And only then can we stop crying too. That was the same for little Tiqiang. He cried and cried, but eventually, the sobs weakened, then faded into sniffles, and finally stopped. Only then did he have time to stammer. "Teacher, Nyan." Uncle N stroked his head. "I know. You don't need to say anything." Then he stood up. "Let me fold you a paper airplane." The paper airplane Uncle An made lit up Tung's face. He ran around the garden flying it in loops, quickly forgetting the tears that had just soaked his cheeks. I clicked my tongue when he finished telling the story. "You idiot. Teacher Nan didn't need to see your eyes to know you had the letter hidden under your shirt." Tiqiang looked puzzled. He knew already. I kicked his leg knowingly, and said, "I think he's known for a long time. Who keeps coming over asking for chilies, lemons, and soy sauce all the time? You'd have to be nuts."